Hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session that is dedicated to the fight for freedom. My name is Saramir Charlet. I am in charge of the International Institution for Human Rights and Peace, and particularly on the Liberty Award. I would like to thank you for being here today. This is an event that is going to be in two parts, as you know already, maybe. The first part of the sequence will be dedicated to the presentation of the three nominees for the award. Anyone between 20 and 25 will be invited to vote for one of the three nominees 2026. Based after that, you'll have the luck to meet a person that presents a struggle for commitment and liberty, Ouissem Belgacem. He will be here for an exceptional time to answer all your questions. It's an AMA. I think some of you have already imagined questions, and if it's not, you have some minutes to prepare yourself. I would like to thank the team of Normandy for Peace to facilitate this event. And before we go any further, I'll invite Mr. Bertrand Legnaud, Vice President of the Normandy region, which has a couple of words to tell you.
Bonjour.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here this afternoon in Caen, in the Abbaye aux Dames, at the seat of the Region Normandy. Region Normandy, as you know, since you follow your history lessons in high school, we have a specific role in this fight for the freedom of Europe and in the world. You're here in this forum to discuss about this and to listen to speakers. And you're going to be this afternoon vote and give your opinion. Freedom arrived one morning, 1944, June 1944, on our beaches by young people from the entire world who had no idea where they were disembarking, but they knew why they were coming, and it was to bring freedom, to help us liberate ourselves, because we were not able to do it alone, to liberate ourselves from dictatorships, from the Nazi horror, and to retrieve our liberty. These soldiers, they were as young as you were. They had between 15 and 25 years old. Sometimes they even lied. They were only 15, 16 years old in order to join the army. And we decided with the Normandy region, Hervé Morin we wanted to show them. The last of them are dying because they are now about 100 years old. And of course, the generation is dying out. We wanted to show them, together with Hervé Morin said, we need to show them that there's a youth that understood the message that they carried 82 years ago, and that we ensure that the young people who had the same age as they had when they went to fight, they're also going to fight on freedom. That's why I created this prize. That's why we open it to you, 15, 25 years old. And the original aspect of this award is because it's your project from the beginning to the end. You will decide of everything. We're going to explain you how it's going to work. But those who have gray hair like me, we do not intervene in your decisions, in your debates. We do not intervene in your choices. It's your award. It's your vision of freedom. It's your votes. It's the results of your votes that decide who is going to win the award at the end of the year. And that winner receives a trophy and receives a financial prize. And the trophy is manufactured by young people. Some people want to be in front of a computer and a piece of paper to think about liberty. Others want to use their skills in the vocational schools with the skills of their teachers to say, for me, liberty, that is the way I conceptualize it, with paper, with wood, with stone, with glass, with metalwork. And that trophy is then given to the winner on the 4th of June in front of 4,000 young people like you to receive this trophy in a ceremony that is marked by lots of emotions and hope and belief in your qualities.
Il faut que vous en preniez conscience. Vous êtes tous, toutes, de
I mean, you're all talented, you all have qualities you sometimes ignore, and you have lots of desires, lots of wishes, lots of things you want to tell us, and we want you to tell them now. Too often you hear, you are future, that we need you tomorrow. No, it's not true. We need you now, today, not tomorrow. We need you today. We need to hear you today. We need to have your opinion today. We need you to act today. This prize again is here for that. That's your prize, your award. Own this award and bring it alive as much as possible. This afternoon, you're going to have the huge luck and happiness to listen to Ouissem Belgacem. It's going to be captivating by what he has to tell you, his personality, the charisma he has. Even though he supports the wrong football team, he supports the Olympique de Marseille. He shouldn't be. Yeah, Wissam, you knew I was going to make that joke, but I hadn't seen that he was in the audience. So that's his smallest default. You can ask him anything you want to ask him, really, all the questions you want to ask him. There's no stupid questions. No, there's nothing. He will answer all the as honestly as possible. And then when you'll finish, you'll have lots of things in your head which you'll have to think about and not say that once you get back in the buses, okay, it was a nice afternoon and now let's get back home and let's forget about it. No, there's lots of important things he's got to tell you, which you're going to have to think about later on so that it grows within you and that you can work and build this work of respect of humanity, which we all need and for which we all want to work towards too. That's something we do in the region daily. We have one single goal. It is for you, for the coming years, for you. You will be probably the most beautiful years in your life because you're young and that in your trainings, in your jobs, in your daily life, in sport that you're going to practice, or whatever you're going to and do, that you be yourself and that you be happy. Thank you. Okay, we told you, as we told you, the Freedom Prize is the prize awarded by the young between 15 and 25 years. You're the only ones here in charge. For the prize 2026, we're at the end of the awarding process because we have our 3 finalists nominated for the award. But actually, the story started a couple of months ago. And I know that in the audience, many of you participate in the project since the beginning of the year. The first stage of this project, it is the call for projects between September and January. We ask young people in the entire world, because it's an international prize, to send us the names of the people or the organizations that would deserve getting the prize for their struggle. We received more than 900 propositions for people from Normandy, from elsewhere in France, and from the entire world. So congratulations to all of you who sent their proposals. We have read them and we handed them on to a jury, international jury of young people. As Bertrand Lagneau was saying, it's not we over 25 who looked at your proposals. We passed them on to other young people who spent a full week in Caen to read through all these proposals. There was personalities, there were organizations, and finally, after many days of collective decision-making, this was a group that was representing 14 different countries, a very rich experience coming between 15 and 25 years old, determined the 3 finalists. And it's these 3 nominees which I'm going to present you now. So prick up your ears, because at the end of these 3 presentations, you're going to have to vote.
Petit mot aux
Quick word to the teachers. Normally we gave you
Vous attendez mon top de liste.
voting sheets. Please wait that I tell you before you distribute them. And I'll tell you when you can hand out the ballots. And please be careful. You have a single question to ask yourself. These 3 struggles, they are worthwhile, they're fundamental, they're as important as the others.
Quel
According to you, Which one should be rewarded with the 2026 Liberty Prize? It can only be one. What is the signal you want to send to the entire world? So without further ado, I'm going to present you the three nominees, one after the other. And we're going to start with the first one. There will be a small video clip followed by some explanation elements. And then we'll pass on to the next nominee. So let's start the first video that presents China Labor Watch, an US NGO. It's an NGO based in New York, founded by Li Qiang for the defense of the workers in China. It was created in a time when China becomes a cheap labor source for many international brands. With this quick industrialization and the globalization of production, the situation has become worse for workers. Very dangerous working conditions, child labor, restriction in workers' rights, and human rights violations are omnipresent in Chinese factories. China Labor Watch is looking at these things and is trying to inform the international opinion about them. It pressures the major international brands, so fast fashion be associated with unhuman working conditions and degrading working conditions. You too can support the fight of China Watch for proper human and dignified working conditions by voting for them for the Liberty Prize. This is our first nominee. It's an NGO. It's called China Labor Watch from New York in the US. But most of its struggle is focused on Chinese factories or factories where Chinese workers are working. Their struggle is to defend the right to dignified working conditions of these workers who very often have to work in very hard, unhuman, and sometimes almost forced work or slavery work. For this, China Labor Watch monitors and publishes reports to inform civil society, but also show the states and the companies that work with these factories, with sweatshops, that do everything to hide the conditions of work, and that's so they can continue to produce cheaply. So it's really a question of shaming, of point in shaming of the brands that are working with these factories. The context of China Labor Watch, it's among others, and not only, the fast fashion industry. Chinese industry is directly linked to the working conditions. That was interesting for the companies, with very low wages that allowed many companies to produce and have lots of profit on the back of these workers. This is the case of the Shein company. I think many of you know them. China Labor Watch has made a report on Shein, and they have allowed to highlight a certain number of violations in the working conditions of the workers and also the female workers, because in the textile factories, it's the women are working on the fashion. It's extremely gendered work, and the textile industry is more a women's labor. And China Labor Watch has revealed that at Shein, and very often, like in many other companies, the working women, they're paid by the number of garments they have realized. They're not paid by hour, but by the number of garments they have made. And for one piece of garment, it's between 6 cents. That is extremely low, even with cheap housing prices. And the average of price Shein is 13 euros. So you can see that they make over 12 euros of margin. Shein is 38 billion euros of turnover. So one of the points on which Shein is basically making its profit on the sweat and hard living working conditions of the people working in their factories. So far for China Labor Watch. So let that sink in. Keep this in mind. And now we are going to a second nominee. This is now the video of Mathieu Lawissa. Mathieu Lawissa has grown up in a rural area in Afghanistan where access to education is particularly hard for women. When she was 17 years, he founded PenPass, a collective for 3,000 volunteers advocating for education for everyone. Since the coming back to power by the Taliban in 2021, he's seeing daily the human rights condition in its country deteriorate. Arrested arbitrarily in March 2023, he was detained 7 months by the Taliban because of his commitment. Mathieu Lawissa acts by creating schools in the remote villages, and he wants to change the mentalities by raising awareness in the population of the importance of education for girls and young women. So today, Mathieu Lawissa is still leading a struggle in Afghanistan. You too can support the struggle of Mathieu Lawissa for the rights of young women and the access to education by voting for him. Second nominee, Mathieu Lawissa. He's nominated as a physical person. It's an Afghan man. His struggle for him is he wants to fight that everyone, and particularly young women, have access to education in Afghanistan. To do this, he sets up schools and mobile libraries in remote areas to give them physical access to education to this young one. But he's also got an awareness-raising work and advocacy work so that the mentalities can change over long term. Then you need to understand that in Afghanistan, there is a systemic oppression context of women. It's the worst country in terms of women's rights, women's life condition. Women are completely excluded from society and marginalized factually and by law and by their rights. So as far as school is concerned, or education, once in the law in Afghanistan says after 12 years old, the girls are not allowed. It's forbidden for girls to go to school anymore after 12 years old. But even, in fact, before 12 years old, not many girls go to school. So there's a true topic in Afghanistan on the right of women to access education and particularly on higher education. This is the context of the struggle of Mathieu Lawissa. The situation in Afghanistan in 2020, the Taliban took back power in the country without getting elected. The military took over the country in 2021, and ever since the situation is getting worse and worse. There is a new penal code that was voted in 2026. The measures in this penal code are as worrying as the other regarding women, and it goes beyond the question of education. A woman cannot walk alone in the street without being accompanied man. A woman that is beaten by her husband cannot denounce her husband and things like that. So it's extremely worrying. And to give you an idea of what it means, in Afghanistan, we are talking about gender-based apartheid. You remember the apartheid in South Africa that was based on your skin color. There was a segregation of people based on their skin color. In Afghanistan, the exclusion of women, it is an apartheid based on the gender, on the gender. This is the struggle of Mathieu Lawissa. Let it sink in. And then we'll go to our third nominee. Nemonte Mekino was born in Amazonia or in the Raoni, one of the autochthonous indigenous people recognized by the country. He created an alliance to protect the ancestral lands and to protect indigenous people's culture and mode of life. This peaceful struggle is in front of courts. And there's a first victory against expropriation and land grabbing by the oil companies. In 2020, Time magazine is among the 100 places and among the 100 most influential people in the world and receives the Goldman Prize for Environment. Manamonte Nikino, she is the speaker for the autochthonous people, very often invisibilized in international decision-making processes. In August 2023, she organized a referendum in Ecuador, so the stopping of oil exploitation in the national park is stopped. You too can support the struggle of Nemonte Nikimo for a healthy and sustainable environment and the rights of indigenous peoples by awarding her the Liberty Prize. And this is our third nominee on a completely different topic, Nemonte Nikimo. This is a woman from Ecuador. She comes of one of the 13 First Nations of Ecuador. Her struggle, it could be divided into two aspects, because at the same time it's the fact to recognize the existence of the rights of indigenous people to be included in the political life of Ecuador. As you remember, the indigenous people, they are here that were there first in the territory. We speak a lot about indigenous people in South America, North America, and in Oceania, but it's actually present on all the continents. So it's take into account the rights of these populations, respecting their mode of life, their cultures, and their very close knowledge of their nature on the territories on which they live. But it's also a struggle against the extractive industry, because most of the oil, and it's the case in Ecuador, is on indigenous land. So when there is land grabbing, when there is oil exploitation, there is destruction of the territories of these indigenous people. So we need to keep this in mind for the struggle of Nemonte, the right to participate in the political life and a civilized for everyone, and also struggle for a healthy and sustainable environment and to preserve nature for the future. So this is the context of the struggle of Nemonte Nikimo. This is what's happening in Ecuador. Ecuador, like many countries, is a country that is divided between two logics that are kind of contradictory. On one hand, they want to recognize the link with nature. It's the only country in the world that has recognized the right to nature, the Pachamama. That is also something that Pachamama is enshrined in the legal system. But at the same time, they need oil exploitation to survive economically. And Nemonte is part of this context. In the video, we talk about a referendum that was organized in 2023 that was co-organized by Nemonte Nikimo. At the origin of this referendum, there was a decision of the state that said that had given its agreement to the extractive industry to destroy 25% of the Guarani indigenous lands, one quarter of the native forest. And thanks to this referendum, the process was stopped. But it's a struggle that is continuing every day. It's always contemporary. That's it. We have reached the end of the presentation of the three nominees. So, behind the three nominees, there's young people like you who sent proposition. If you're a teacher and you want to participate in the Liberty Prize next year with your classes, and you contact us and we can include you. So this is an important moment now. You're going to vote for the nominee who should receive the Liberty Prize for this year. Before the teacher distribute the ballots, important, only check one box, else it will not be counted. Do not write anything, not your name or your comments, nothing. Just do not write anything. And do not fold the ballot. That's easier for us to get them back.
Eh bien,
So let's go. Now the ballots can be handed out.
alors, je me permets de préciser que même si ça en a pas l'air, c'est un...
I just wanted to say that this is an extremely official, formal vote, so you don't need to chat among each other. Let's try to keep it quiet.
Alors, j'invite les enseignants.
I invite the teachers to ensure together that it's going to be quiet in the audience for this official voting time for the Liberty Prize, all your votes will be counted and validated by a notary. It is a very serious project.
Alors les élèves, écoutez bien.
Dear teacher, dear students and young people, please listen to me. When you have finished voting, when you've checked the box mark, can you please listen to me? Listen to the teacher. Now, normally you're not supposed to talk, just check your box. Once your box is checked, please pass all the ballots to your right. Some people are going to pick up the ballots on the right of the rows. Your right. So over there. Over there. If you you're not between 15 and 25 years old, you're not allowed to vote. We'll be checking your DNA on the ballots. So, since taking advantage of this free time, if there are any teachers who want to, do not hesitate. Do not hesitate to calm your teams down, your school children down. You can invite other classes to participate. With the Institute, we help you in the voting in class. It's 50 minutes. We send you all the files and the video of the 3 nominees. We give you some activities so you can introduce them, and then you can use students to vote. So it's up until the 30th of April. So if you're interested, please come to see us. And the students, don't hesitate to distribute the votes with your friends. You can also vote on the website of the Liberty Prize.
Parce qu'on a un petit manque de mobilisation là, sur le vote en classe, donc vous êtes allés... Ouais, trop bien. Génial. Alors, est-ce que ça se termine?
So are you done? Have you voted? Are you okay? The results will be published at the beginning of May on Instagram, on the website, and you know who won the Liberty Prize, beginning of May. And he'll come in June to get his prize at the Zenith in Caen. If the vote is finished, can we please focus again?
Est-ce que c'est bon? Est-ce que...
Are you okay?
peuvent me faire un...
Can the people who picked up the votes, the ballots, let me know?
Ça a l'air d'être bon.
Looks like it's done. Wow. We can now move on to the second part of this event. And I'm now going to ask...
Je vais accueillir sur scène sous...
I will ask... Give them a round of applause. I'm going to ask Mr. Ouissem Belgacem and my colleague Apolline to join me on stage.
Bonjour Ouissem, merci.
Hello, Ouissem, and thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for being here today. You know, the Freedom Prize. Very well, you can explain this to us. You are a former professional football player, and now you are a writer, conference speaker, an artist, and more generally, an activist against all forms of discrimination. You wrote 2 books, Goodbye My Shame and Yama, and Goodbye My Shame was also adapted into a docu-series by Canal Plus. I recommend you watch it and also read his books. And as I was saying, you're also an artist. You just released an EP, and you also have a special bond with the prize because you were chair of the jury last year and a witness also for these events during the votes like today. We're very happy to have you. Can you tell us your story? I'm going to turn a bit to face the audience. Hello, everyone. I'm extremely happy to be here. I was talking about this with Bertrand this morning. I came here several times and I almost feel like this is home when I come to Normandy. Thank you very much for having me once again in this beautiful region. So just to give you an idea of my story, I can tell you that my story is the story of a young man who felt crazy in love with football at a very young age. And I've never had my father or big brother to push me to play. It was true love for the sports that we love in France. I started playing. I was not too bad. I played in Aix-en-Provence near Marseille, where I'm from. And at 13 years old, I got several offers from several training centers. The training centers is where you put young people who have the potential to become professional footballers. And I got offers from Nice, Montpellier, and Toulouse. And I chose Toulouse because my mother cared very much about my studies, and I hope you care too about your studies. And they had a very strong education center. And I started in the center at 13 years old, and year after year I started to get better. My parents are originally from Tunisia, so I was able to play for the national team at a young age for the Cup of Nations, but I had a secret that I was hiding, that I liked boys. I realized that very young, and I also quickly realized I had to hide that where I was from. I'm from a popular background. I play football. I'm from a Muslim family, so it's not a very easy context to say you're gay. I evolved in different clubs, and it was difficult because I tried everything I could to try, and as I call it, to become heterosexual. And I can tell you, it is impossible to change your sexual orientation. The only way is to accept yourself the way you are. But at 20 years old, I was not convinced of this. So I asked my agent to look for a club abroad, and I played in the MLS, which is like the League One in the US, and I played for the Colorado Rapids in Denver, and I saw the same level of homophobia, which led me to end the chapter of football. After playing football in 3 continents, in Europe, in Africa, and in the US, I realized that football would always be opposed to people like me. I created a new life for myself in England. I studied again, a bachelor's degree, master's. Then I worked as a consultant engineer at Veolia, a company that works on water and energy. And then I missed football too much. In 2014, I created a new company. Actually, it was my first company. So I created a company called On Track, and the objective was to help professional football players to prepare for their next career. But I hadn't anticipated that by working again in football, I would once again be back into homophobia, and I just couldn't handle hearing what football players say about women or about gay people. And I kind of risked my company, but decided to write this first book, which you mentioned, Goodbye My Shame. It took me 3 years to write the book. I'm going to spoil it a bit for those who will watch the docuseries, but the book brought me a lot, but it also cost me a lot. My company was working well. I had 8 employees. I had clients working in Tottenham, Chelsea, in Spain, in France. And on the day I released the book, almost 85% of my clients left me. these guys didn't want to work with a gay man. And it's terrible because they know they are straight, but just being associated with me was too much for them, but I absolutely don't regret it. And I think I needed to go through what I went through in my life so that I could send the messages that I'm sending to you today. These are the main lines of my story, but we are going to have time for exchanges in a moment together. Well, thank you very much. You can give him a round of applause. And with Apolline, we have a few questions for Ouissem, just to launch the conversation, and then we'll quickly give you the floor. So if you have any question, you can start preparing them in your mind. Don't be impressed by the stage. We're together. We're fine. I'm nice, I promise. And we have people who have microphones, so if you want to ask a question, just raise your hand. Somebody will bring you one. And Apolline, I think, had a question for you, Ouissem. Yes, thank you. You started talking about your first book, Goodbye My Shame, about your journey. Could you tell us why you chose this title, Goodbye My Shame? It took me a very long time to find the title of this first book because I wanted to summarize my whole story. Yes, my story is about football, but it's also a quest for freedom. I needed to be able to be myself in a context that was doing everything it could to silence my identity. I don't know if you know this sentence, straight standard, hetero-normed society, which means that the norm, the standard, is being straight. You might not realize it, but you might understand when I'm giving you a few examples. When I was 5 or 6, coming from school, my mom would ask me, how did the day go at school? Have you found a girlfriend? She was saying this with all kindness, of course, but it made me think, okay, my mom wants me to have a girlfriend. Then I grew up and started watching Disney movies, Beauty and the Beast, Cinderella, and once again, it's just heterosexual stories. Then when you're a teenager, Marvel, Spider-Man, Superman, and once again, you can see that the heroes are always straight. In sports, I honestly thought that in order to play in League One, you had to be straight because I couldn't see any gay football player in the field. And one of the greatest struggles in my life, yes, there are discriminations in society, but I think the biggest obstacles we have in life are psychological obstacles. And in order to make the most of my potential in arts, I had to be able to say goodbye to my shame. And you know what? Even though I wrote a book called Goodbye My Shame, I'm not done with this shame. You cannot live for so many years hating yourself. You cannot negate your own identity for so many years. Even though you wrote a book, it's not going to happen overnight. Every day I'm trying to say goodbye to my shame, and I think it's the struggle of a lifetime on many different topics. I'm getting many messages from people who tell me, I read your book and maybe I was limiting myself on this, and now I'm saying goodbye to my shame. And I'm going to give you an example that really touched me and has nothing to do with my own story. One day, a 17-year-old girl sent me a message on Instagram and told me, Ouissem, I read your book, and so same for me, goodbye my shame. And she told me I'm not a lesbian, I'm straight, but I'm a black young girl, and since I'm black, many people think I love Beyonce, etc., but when I love rock music. So you know what? Goodbye my shame as well. And I think this is beautiful because when you look inside, that you might have many obstacles on whatever topic that can limit you. And by saying goodbye my shame, I thought the title was a symbol because the purpose was to use a unique story where you can be inspired through a universal message that resonates with everybody.
Et justement, tu as parlé d'une combat
And actually, you spoke about the struggle of a lifetime for several topics. You also wrote a second book, Yama, which is a tribute to your mother and more generally to all the women who had to leave their country for a better life. Why was it important for you to write this book? I got a lot of feedback on my first book, and some of the feedback I got from readers was, your mother is very tough, she's harsh. Because at the end of the first book, I came out to my mother, and I'm not going to spoil, but it didn't go well. I did some research. I knew that the word gay could scare some people, so I tried to explain to my mother, I don't like girls, I told her. And she didn't understand. She was saying, so were you with in Thailand or Australia? And I said, Mom, if I don't like girls, it means I like... And she got it. And she looked angry. She punched the table, said, I don't want this at home. And it ended up with, take your stuff and leave my house. And then we didn't speak for 2 years with my mother. It was not easy, but I know my mother. She's an extremely kind woman. And for those people who told me that my mom didn't react well, I needed to explain how a person, a woman who is very kind, can end up reacting like this with her son, who she loves more than anyone else. And I needed to tell her story from Tunisia up until France, and everything she went through that led her to react like she did. And to finish on a positive note, everything is fine with my mother today. She was even part of my docu-series. She's very happy with the second book. And in the end, I think many people are scared of coming out because they think it's going to cut the ties with certain people. I'm not trying to tell you a perfect story like a Disney movie. It happens. There are friends I don't speak with anymore, but the people who love you for yourself, for who you are, they stay. As we say, the real ones know. And I think it's important to realize that you're not friends with somebody because of their sexual orientation. That makes no sense. If I'm friends with somebody now today, it's because we have a common vision of life, same humor, same interest like PlayStation or football. But I'm not friends with a friend because he loves women. It makes no sense. And sometimes when you come out to somebody, it can even get you closer than before.
Peut-être une dernière question avant de vous laisser la parole à vous dans la salle.
Final question before we give the floor to the room. You're not presenting yourself as somebody who fights only homophobia, but any form of discrimination. And you told us the story of this young girl who compared this with racism. I would like to ask you why fighting against discriminations is global, comprehensive, and should be, and why we should fight all discriminations simultaneously. I will give you my opinion because people ask me. I really believe in the convergence of struggles. I don't think as a society we can improve if only gays defend gays, Arabs defend Arabs, or women defend women. I'm not a woman, and I'm part of protests against violence against women in Paris. I'm not black, but I went to almost all Black Lives Matters protests in Paris. And I think it's important for you to understand at a young age. I know sometimes as a teenager you have a self-focused vision of life, thinking that everything revolves around your world. But sometimes it's important to take a step back and realize that if you want to be a good person, you need to oppose any form of injustice, not just those that impact yourself directly. I'll give you an example. And I'm not trying to target this region, which I love, but when I used to play football in Corsica region, people would insult me. When I went to shoot, somebody would call me a swear word for Arab in France, bougnoul, and I thought it was really important when one of my colleagues who's white opposed that person and said, you cannot use that word. And this is true altruism, selflessness, and it surprised the player, that person, rather. And I think we should know there is no miracle solution in the fight against discriminations. You're not going to come up with a vaccine that will make people open-minded overnight. And it's when everybody's committed against all forms of injustice that we can progress as a society. And this is why I think it would be hypocritical to speak out against homophobia and then tolerate racism or sexism etc. So it's important for me to tell you that as a committed person, and I think we can no longer we don't have the luxury not to be committed. Unfortunately, there are still too many injustices on earth. And if you want to be consistent with the values that you want to defend in life, then you need to be consistent on all topics. Thank you very much. If some of you in the audience want to ask questions, it's time. You can just raise your hand. We have 2 hands in the middle, one over there. We're going to bring you a microphone, and we'll tell you who will start speaking.
Vas-y.
Je t'écoute.
Bonjour déjà.
Hello. I don't know if you've been following the news in football and homophobia, but in League One, there's a day every year dedicated to the fight against homophobia, and there are players who do not want to participate, which is a sign for Mustafa Mohamed, for example. It's a sign that there's not enough progress. We know that a few years back, a First League player openly came out and made his relationship with a man official. In traditional sports, are you seeing any progress when it comes to homophobia? Thank you for your question. I would love to have a very positive narrative, but I can only be realistic today. I think there are progresses, but it's very slow. And this initiative you're alluding to, for those who don't know, in 2021, the Professional Football League decided to fight homophobia by putting rainbow on the jerseys. And this initiative led to a lot of controversies. Several players didn't want to wear it, but you should wonder why. You cannot just work on communication without any substance. You cannot ask a player to wear a shirt if they don't know why they're doing it and what's the cause. I'm going to give you a simple example. There's a PSG player, Bertrand, who was wearing rainbow-colored shoelaces, and you can look it up on Google if you want to laugh. The journalist told him, "Wow, that's great, you're committed with your rainbow-colored laces." And yeah, he said, "Yes, it's important to fight against racism." The journalist said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Yeah, this is all the colors of the rainbow, like yellow, black, white." And you cannot just give a shirt to a football player and tell them to wear it without working on the issue. You cannot take a shortcut on those issues. I honestly think you can train people to respecting differences, but for this you need to go to the stadiums, to the clubs, talk to them, train them. And unfortunately, the initiative you talk about was stopped this year. The LFP decided to stop the initiative because it was creating too many problems every year. And even personally, I'm tired of going on TV every year to explain that players don't want to wear it. But what they didn't understand is that we're not asking them to open the Pride Parade with a gay flag. No. This day happens around the 17th of May, which is a day against violence against gay people, homosexuals, and trans people. And as a human being, you should ask yourself, if you're not even against the fact that 2 women holding hands can be assaulted on the street, what kind of human being are you? So the Football League is stopping this initiative, and I'm very angry at them because you cannot stop an action but not replace it by anything else, because else the message being sent is that in football we don't want homosexual athletes, and we don't want to fight homophobia. That's my conclusion.
Alors, il y a une autre question.
Vous êtes gentil, mais vous n'avez pas besoin d'applaudir.
You don't have to give a round of applause every time. That's very nice. Hello, I also have a question for you. I would like to know if your mother was the first person you came out to. That's an interesting question. What you should know is that in the life of a homosexual man, you don't come out just once. And even more when you're not really a representation of what people imagine a homosexual person looks like. And just for a side note, the issue is that if you always present the same image of a homosexual person, people think it's just that. You might be too young, but back then there were movies like La Cage aux Folles, who gave visibility to homosexual people, but always presenting them as very flamboyant, very feminine. And at your age, I thought there's a problem here. I know I'm not straight, but when I see gay people in the media, I don't recognize myself either, so I thought I was an anomaly. And it's the same for any topic. I'll give you another quick example. In the south of France, there's a TV series called Plus belle la vie. It happens in Marseille, and there's not a single Arab person in there. They put one in there, and then we heard here at the end of the season that they stole money. It's a cliche, again. And about coming out, I came out many times in my life. The first time I came out was to myself. And I will never forget the day I looked at myself in the mirror and I said those 3 words, I am gay. And I had so much emotion because I thought, that's what I've been fighting against for years. And I thought, now I'm going to have to be proud. I started coming out to my closest friends, which went more or less well. Then my sisters. I have 4 sisters. The first one, when I told her, I said, I need to talk to you. And when I told her, she said, oh, I was scared. I thought you were going to tell me you're smoking. Because she started smoking 6 months before and she couldn't quit. Smoking is bad for you, right? Okay. The second sister, when I told her, was physically sick to her stomach. She was throwing up. She went on sick leave. And my mom asked me, what did you tell your sister? And I said, I don't know, just give her a painkiller. My sister was scared that my mother would ever hear about it. My third sister was even more complicated. For those who don't know, in France, it took a very long time to make same-sex marriage legal. And one day I called my mother. I used to live in England. I called my sister, and I could hear a lot of noise. And she said, Ouissem, the family's in danger. I was scared for my nephews. I said, what's going on? Are the children okay? She said, yes, but you have no idea. They want to break what family means. And she was on the street protesting against my rights. So imagine that when I told her, it felt weird to her. And for my eldest sister, there was no problem. But if I use the reference of a video game, my mom was like the final boss. You only have one mother, not 2, not 3. And often it's even harder to tell people when you're really scared of losing them. And I don't say it very often, but I can tell you, I have 4 sisters. There are 2 sisters I'm no longer in contact with anymore. Because unfortunately, even in 2026, this type of topic can break a family. Which reminds me of a little story before the next question. I sponsor an organization called Le Refuge. Maybe you will need it one day, or if you have friends who do, feel free. It's an organization that helps young people from 15 to 25 who are kicked out of their home when their parents hear about them being gay. And it's not in Afghanistan, it's in France. And unfortunately, every year there are more and more young people who end up on the street. When I came out to my mother, I was 28 years old. It didn't go well, but I was financially independent. At your age, usually people don't have a job. So if your parents kick you out, you're on the street. You don't have a salary. You cannot pay for rent. So it's very difficult. So if one day you hear of somebody who needs it, go on Google Le Refuge, and there's a free toll number available. Thank you for your question. We can move on to the next one.
Alors, il y a une question
There's a question at the back of the room. I mean, if you want, you can get up.
Oh.
Hello. I just have a question on, have you already been supported by someone really famous. In terms of support, that's interesting because I've received lots of support from lots of different areas, but in the world of football, absolutely not. I had no expectation in the world of football, but I was kind of disappointed. I think the person that is in the world of internet, I don't know if you know them. Does Ricky Martin tell you anything? Yeah, well, Bertrand is going to sing you a song by Ricky Martin after that. And but I think one of the most famous people I know, this is a childhood friend. We played together in Toulouse. Moussa Sissoko is playing in the French national team. He's played for Tottenham in Toulouse together with me. And that's someone I know well. And I think the worst player against we had played against the French national team. They had been champion of Europe. And I was playing defense, and I had two attackers. One is called Karim Benzema, and the other is called Atem Ben Arfa. And so I was on the right side against them. The game lasted 90 minutes. It was about 3 months. It was really long. So thank you.
Alors, une question sur la gauche, Ouissem, gauche et au fond.
We have a question at the back. Can you kind of get up so we know who you are? Hello. It's just to know, do you have any teams to fight against discriminations? What's your future plans? Well, I'm very happy to be here today. I do lots of public speeches in front of many different audiences, and I need to recognize to the young people, it's kind of my favorite audience, because I think that is where we can have most impact. Sometimes I speak with football players, but you speak to someone who's 25, 35 years old, he's multimillionaire, they know everything about everything, and they're not going to listen to you. And that's kind of difficult. And sometimes when I do conferences in front of adult audiences, without being football players, we're kind of in an opinionated society. Everyone's got an opinion on everything without knowing specifically things or scientific studies to support his opinion. So I've got trouble talking to adults. But I strongly believe that in education. And I know that at your age, you still go to school. I think you're very strong on your capacity of opening your minds on many different topics. If I'd worked one day at the Ministry of Education, but that's not planned, I would teach history with far more precision and far more strength. I can give you a concrete example. I would like in school that I would have learned a history about the LGBTQI community, because when you teach, that gives you a sense of belonging that is stronger. And so I just want a quick historical aspect on the LGBTQI community. A very important woman in our history is P. Marshall Johnson. She's a black transsexual woman. In 1969, when lots of police people in the United States, they were doing raids against gay bars, and they would beat up every gay person they met. This woman, she had the courage to throw a brick against the police, and this started the Stonewall riots in 1969. In 1970, 1 year later, generated the first gay pride. And these are demonstrations whose aim is to show the equality of rights between heterosexuals and homosexuals. It started in New York. Now we have them everywhere. Together we have them maybe even in Caen. There's in Paris, everywhere. And if I had been taught that in school, it would have maybe reconciled me with part of my identity. And it's the same with many topics on colonization. I know that between what my parents told me, my friends told me on colonization in North Africa, the history is slightly different from what I was learning in school. There was less details and also less finger pointing. But when you like a country, very often say, oh, I'm very critical regarding sports. It's because I love football and I want to look it into the eye and pull it to the right side. And it's because I love France that I said, you need to be able to look at yourself as a country. And sometimes there are topics where we are maybe more conservative than we think. And it's by looking at each other that we can overcome the trauma of the past. And combined with education, will really have a deep effect on the struggle against discrimination. Are there other questions? Yes, one at the back. Can you maybe not film me? Thank you. Early on, you spoke about heterosexual representation. How do you live the fact that you are a queer representative for young people? Well, it's an interesting question. Thank you. But I'm not sure that I am a queer icon. People said they're almost meaningless. You're an icon. You're a pallbearer. I'm just a boy that lied on his identity for 20 years. For 20 years, I've played the heterosexual. No one knew in my club, in my surroundings. If I had to do a debrief on the League of Champions, no one would have said, oh, he's sure, it's clearly gay. I think that when you lied to yourself so long on who you are, I arrived at an age and a stage of my life where I am myself. I don't want to be anything else. I don't want to be aligned with, I want to be aligned with myself, with the values I defend. And if young people in your age, they recognize themselves in this, what I'm saying, my narrative, perfect. If others do not recognize themselves in that narrative, okay, that's c'est la vie. But my objectives and my goal is not to inspire or to convince anyone. I'm not here to convince you. I'm just explaining to you the reality, my vision, and I trust you, you're all smart enough to make your own opinion on that question, on that issue. So I'm myself. I present my messages the way I present them. If that can help young people to feel better, good, all the best. But when I come into a room, and that may be the case today, there's always a part of the audience that is already agrees with me. But I know that on another part of the audience, whatever I'm going to say, whatever the arguments I'm going to present, at the end they're going to say, they will be just as homophobic as a woman. I've stopped wasting energy trying to change their minds and convince them. What I'm interested in is that all the ones that are kind of sitting on the fence, that are kind of slightly racistic, slightly homophobic or sexist. Maybe it's they follow what they heard about them. And I want to more talk to them and change their minds, try to change their minds.
Que dans 10 ou 20 ans, les clubs ou les championnats trouveront de réelles solutions?
Will the clubs find real solutions to fight against homophobic behaviors and attitudes? For me, the solution is a two-part system. We spoke about education, and that's super important, but education takes time. We're going to have to train one generation after the other. But there's also the legal part, the punishing part, and I think the sanction part. And sometimes you need to sanction, because now that we've explained, we see many times that homophobic songs in a football stadium is just as bad as racist songs. We need to stop. And if it doesn't stop, we need to sanction. Everyone here in the room who are not homosexual, if you want to have an idea of what I feel in a stadium, when you go into a stadium, as we heard earlier at the Lille-Lens, you have tens of thousands of men who are screaming, you need to burn these gays, you need to burn these faggots. Change the word to anything else. I see many girls say, just imagine you go into a stadium saying, you need to burn all these women. What would you feel? Or you need to burn all these black people, all these Arabs. Well, that would be unacceptable. What I don't understand, that in the law for football games, when there are racist songs, we stop the game, because with a lot of education, with lots of sanctions and awareness-raising campaigns, slowly people start understanding that racism is bad. But look, recently there was a game, Spain-Egypt. There was songs, horrible songs in the audience. Just imagine, and that happens even though we have lots of efforts into against racism. In the fight against homophobia, we don't invest much in it. I don't even know if in 10, 20 years, I'm not giving you. This is not a dark vision. I think when I'll be dead, and I think that's long down the road, homophobic behaviors would still be on the earth, because I think it is part of human culture. Or sometimes it's all just a solution of easy solution, thinking that all your issues in your world is based on it's the fault of someone who is different from you, different skin color, different sexual orientation. What makes me really gives me hope, and this is really your task. You are the ones who are going to define the trend of the coming years on what type of society you want to create. And I'm really saddened when I say that today there's lots of young people who wake up in the morning and they realize that they're homosexuals, and they say, well, I'd rather be dead rather than being gay. And I can tell you this happens every day. In my web series, there's a young man, Luca, 13 years, and he was harassed in school because of his supposed sexual orientation. Think about this. Sometimes when you're a teenager, you can be hard, making fun of some of people and saying, oh, apparently she's lesbian, but that has real consequences on people's lives. So think about that. Can I just get back on that? Between the two questions, I just wanted to get back on the question that you just asked. You have worked hard on awareness raising and clubs and in trainings. Can you maybe present that? Yes, sometimes I go into sports training centers. If you look at the series, an example in episode 4, I go to AS Monaco, and there's one young people who says, I hate all the gays. And how many gays do you know? He says, no, I don't know any, but I hate all of you. And by looking deeper, homophobia, that's a phobia is an irrational fear. The young guy starts understanding that maybe it is going too far to say these things like that on an entire community of people which he doesn't know. And what I'm frustrated about is that education works. When we talk to them, to these young people, I can see that after 1 hour of 2 hours of sessions, they're more open in their minds. So we said that we should deploy this at a wider scale, at the national scale. And I just wanted to say also on what acceptation really is, because I remember I was in a football club and I'm doing my speech just today, and at the end, there's a young one who says, Ouissem, actually, if you had been in a center together with me, we could have been friends. I'm gays like you, I'm fine, but the
ne fait de mal à absolument personne.
the camp gays like Bilal Hassani, he's a really good friend of mine, and he likes wearing wigs and high heels. But why should he be hated for that? And he's a really good friend of mine. So it's really important to think against yourself and to open your mind. And on the weight of homosexuality, let's not mix up sexual orientations and your level of femininity, of masculinity. You can be homosexual and being a boxer, a football player, or a ballet dancer. It's the same for girls. And it's maybe not something you hear every day, but keep that in mind. Thank you. Where's the microphone? A question in the back. Raise your hand so we know where you are. Have you already seen a movie on homosexuals that has that you like, that has impacted you?
Un film qui m'a beaucoup plu, tu veux dire à part ma série?
A movie apart from my TV series? No, just kidding. Back then, Brokeback Mountain. That's something that had a deep impact because it's played by two heterosexual males, Heath Ledger and Jake Gyllenhaal. And I found this really remarkable because the first time they were not showing just sexual relations. They showed intimacy and tenderness between two men. And for me, I had never seen that. The series, like I've seen recently, Fellow Travelers. I don't know if you heard about that. That looks at a homosexual couple over the years in the United States, and there was kind of a scare against homosexuals in the 1970s, 80s in the US. And it's good to see the way you yourself are being represented. And everyone here in the room who think today that maybe there's too much focusing on homosexuals, etc. But actually it's not true. It's not because on Canal Plus or on Netflix there's maybe 2, 3 or 4, 5 series that mention homosexualities. If you look at the entire catalog, it's not even 2% of the entire Amazon Prime and Disney or Netflix. But it's just that people are so used that we're not talking about these topics, that when we're talking, immediately say, oh my God, they're constantly rubbing it in our face. Thank you for your question.
N'hésitez pas.
Hello. In your opinion, what's the problem with discrimination in the world of football, and where does this intolerance come? In your opinion, what's the issue with discrimination in the world of football, and where does this intolerance come? In my book, I'm speaking about systemic homophobia. Systemic means that it's absolutely rooted in the system. It's not just the case of 1 or 2 individuals. It's not 1 or 2 bad apples that is going to stop homophobia. And I'm telling you this because, concretely, you're a teenager in France today. I mean, if you go into any football club, and that is whatever the region, you're going to train. The most common on the football field is fucking faggot. And if you go into the changing rooms and in the football, we don't talk about football. We don't talk about girls. They're going to say, I've got this girl, and you're going to brag about your girlfriends. I remember back then, and it's still the case, when you don't do, actually the coach says, come on, you're playing like faggots, and then we talk about, and you hear tens of thousands of fans that sing these horrible slogans, and all this creates a system. And I would like to say that together with the phone, you don't even have to go to the stadium. You watch the game on TV and you hear it, and it's in your living room, these songs, and all this as a result creates this environment, this toxic environment that makes the world of football particularly homophobic. If there's not an action that is done at each level of the sports, then we'll never be able to change it. Yeah. I don't know what to say more, because I don't want to specifically target football, because homophobic you have it in other sports. And at one moment, I thought it was only team sports. But when you look at tennis, or men's tennis, not women's tennis, in the men's tennis, there is not one player since the beginning of time that has not made its coming out. It is impossible statistically. And thinking about my first point, homosexuals, there's always been there since the beginning of time. But at one moment, when you live in a country where, or you're in a sport that is particularly hostile towards human, you hide yourself. And I had the hope that with my book or my series, a Europa League footballer who says, they're saying I am gay. It hasn't happened yet, but I know that I have a friend of mine, he plays in high-end clubs, and when my book came out, he was very impacted, and we had a discussion. He said, Ouissem, in life there are things you can't say, there's things you can't be. And I know he was referring to that, but I was pained by that because I know his wife and his 2 kids. I know that one day he's going to want to become himself. And if it hadn't been this pressure to be normalized, in fact, to being hetero, especially when you're a football player, maybe he wouldn't have chosen this woman and we wouldn't have made these 2 kids. So I hope I've answered your question.
Alors, Le micro est au fond à droite, Ouissem, par là-bas. Ouais, voilà.
Bonjour.
Bonjour. Depuis votre changement,
Ouais.
Since your change in jobs, do you still, in my change of jobs, do you still experience homophobic behaviors? No, I mean, I am very open, so I'm talking about the topic. I'm not hiding anything. I mean, I've got the impression that I only speak about tolerance and open-mindedness and acceptance. But every time I go on TV, I get death threats because for many people, they cannot stand the idea that some people say, Wissem, if we listen to you in 30, 40 years, it'd be normal to be gay. Say, what are you talking about? I'm already here. So I think that online cyber harassment, that is a true topic, and especially at your age. But it's true that when I'm more artistic surroundings, I write books, I play music, I do films. Well, usually it's maybe people who are from their life projects, and their projects are more open-minded than the average football player. I think the problem with the football, but you're really in a bubble. I mean, I was almost cut off from the world. You're 13 years old, you're paid, you live on the training center. On the weekend, you play games when you're international. I used to play with the Tunisian teams during the holidays. So you are completely in a football bubble. You're cut off from the rest of the world. So it's true that it's easier for me. I'm less impacted by homophobic, and it's good because it's absolutely exhausting. And you have some activists here in the audience. You need to know, you need to preserve yourself psychologically. You need to safeguard yourself. There's a very heavy mental load, and you can't always fight. Sometimes you need to reserve breathing times because you'll always be uphill. You need to save yourself, and that is something I'm learning how to preserve myself, saving my energy, because when you're passionate, you also want to be in the front lines. Thank you for your question. Hello? My question is, have you already been confronted with some situation of homophobic from your football players or football players or rivals? Well, I never ever knew that I was gay, so it wasn't directed against myself. But you will see in my web series, you will see that the speaker of the stadium, he was himself homosexual. I heard these insults all my life. Said we absolutely need to hide. And nobody needs to know. And sometimes I can tell you a story. I don't know when it happened, but I was in a taxi, and the Uber driver, he was talking about the Champions League. So I give him the analysis of the game, and since I talk about this, he understood that I am heterosexual. He says, "So you're going back and to see your girlfriend?" I said, "No, I'm going to see my boyfriend," and he became quiet and never said anything anymore. But that's not a problem. Discrimination. Why is it extremely unfair? Because in life there's things you don't choose. And I often give the example, if you don't like my sweater today, and tomorrow I come with a red sweater and said, Wissem, I don't like your red sweater. Okay, and tomorrow I'll take a green. But if I come here today and someone, I have a problem with you because of the fact that you're an Arab, can I change my skin? No.
Non.
No. Well, it's exactly the same for sexual orientation. If somebody comes and says, Wissem, I don't like the fact that you're gay, well, I can't change anything today, and I find it technically absolutely unfair that I'm being accused of something I haven't chosen, and two, I can't change. But what the taxi driver can change is its way of seeing the world. Open a book, look at a movie, open your mind, go talk with a club. You see, what brings us together is probably more important than what separates us. Do you think that the fact that you've written your story has helped you to accept it and to recover the child you were? Very often you have this mythos of the writer who writes as a form of therapy. But you know, my first book, I was 33 years old. I did my coming out to my mother, who's the last most important person in my life when I was 28. And then after, when I was 30, everything went well with my mom. The reason I can say this with such strength, I don't do it for me, I do it for you. It really pains me to tell myself that there's young people who are going to hide. I'm not going to do this sport. I'm not going to choose this trade. This is really hard for me, as I've seen last week in a junior high school in Toulouse, where two young hetero, they harassed a young boy from junior high school because they said it was cool to be homophobic in the courtyard. And I mean, it's stupid. If I do this today, it's really for the coming generations. I mean, I'm an old football player, 38 years old. I'm not going to play again, sadly. It's cost me my dream. That's the life. You need to move on. And as I said earlier, I had to go through that in order to be able to do what I do today. And I think for me, football is over. What I'm trying to say is that if through my books I can contribute to build a more inclusive world, more tolerant world regarding difference, because difference is clearly a strength, and I hope you're all convinced of that. And we're all different in a certain way. If I can contribute to that, then that's mission accomplished for me, and I'm really happy. On the left, yeah, I mean, they were discussing about who was going to ask a question, so it's probably going to be a fantastic question. Hello. Earlier, you said you're Muslim. How can you live your sexual orientation and your religion?
Écoute,
A very good question. Of course, I'm not here to evangelize, but I'm going to give you the main lines of how I see my opinion on this topic. On the earth, we have three big monotheistic religions: Judaism, Christianism, and Islam. These three main religions, they are based on three holy books: Torah, Bible, and the Quran. And the passage that is being used to discriminate against homosexuality is the same in the three books. Is the one that speaks about the people of Sodom and Gomorrah with the prophet Lot. And for those who have not read the holy books, those who have never read the Bible, the Quran, or the Torah, this is not a book where you're being told, if you want to be a good Muslim, you need to get up at 8:30, you need to drink a glass of orange juice and eat 2 croissants. No, that's not what the text says. They tell you a story inside, and based on the story, you take a lesson out of it, how you live your life. So the story in the people of Sodom and Gomorrah is that each person that went through this village, these people were attacked, they were robbed, and they were raped. So there was people who were men sleeping with women, but it was in context of violence, and it was adults with children. But there was also men that were violating women, raping women, and even the woman of the prophet, who is a heterosexual, she was also punished. So all this to say that when I read this passage, personally, I don't say that I am the descendants of these people. I've never raped anyone in my life. I have a boyfriend today. He's an adult, and we're consenting adults. So I do not recognize myself in this passage. The problem is that many people on this world, they have a very totalitarian vision of the way they see things. And it's not because we don't share exactly the same vision of this passage that we can, in some countries, to stone myself and chop off my head or kill myself. For people who are religious, you are on earth to be the best version of man. It's only when you die, God will tell you if go to the right or to the left. It's not you. Our job as humans saying, you're a good human, you're a bad human. No, it's not how it works. So it's not, that's a vision I'm not the only one to share. If you're interested, there's a book that was published in 2014 that's called Quran and the Flesh by Ludovic Mohammed. He's the first gay imam in France. He did a fantastic book by Kaina Balol, who said, My Truth, My Islam. She's the first woman imam in France. It's not just my vision. And I'm not saying that I have the absolute truth. It's my ways of living my spirituality. That's just me. It harms no one. So I just want to say, leave me alone and live my spirituality alone. I'm not going to attack anyone who's not believing like me.
Alors, je voulais juste vous dire,
I just wanted to say we're coming to the end. We're going to take 2 questions, maybe 3. There might be frustrated people, just warning you.
le micro.
And sorry, I just wanted to add something quickly. Do you know, in the history of humanity, we have been led to believe that some things were legal, but they were not ethical. Let's not think, I know that you're 16, 17 years old, you've always known the life you're living and it's normal. But if you look at the history of our civilization, for a very long time we thought that men were superior to women. For a very long time, it was normal that were some skin colors that were superior to others. And I think it's the same on homosexuality. For a very long time, we said that a homosexual person, it's not the same as a heterosexual person. But the fact that I love men instead of women, I was the same football player. There's exactly the same football strategies. It doesn't change anything in the way of how I play football or my genetical heritage. So it's important, you at your age where you're developing your critical sense, your critical sense and your open mindset, it's not because it's always been like that that it should remain like that.
Merci.
Thank you. Hello. I'd like to know, with age and becoming more mature, do you think people accept homosexuality more, not just in football, but in daily life? I would like to think that yes, things are progressing in the law, but the law does not make a culture. It's not because in the law saying something homophobic is illegal, it doesn't mean it does not happen in society. And we need to make that distinction. It's not because the law is passed that everybody stops. But I would like to think that things are improving. But what I do know is that for all the struggles for minorities, for the rights of women, it's a continuous struggle. If somebody told me 10 years ago that the US would cancel the right to abort in certain states, I wouldn't have believed it, and it is the case. I also think about trans people in the US and all over the world. For more than 5 years, I've been speaking publicly, and I really think that there's a setback now over the past 2 years, which is in line with the rise of fascism all over the world. And topics like homosexuality, for example, tend to create tensions. And I'm not here to talk about politics, but I'd like to say a word. These days, we're seeing a lot of the far right pretending to be a shield for homosexual men because they have some gay people in their parties. But to me, these people defend a certain vision of what a homosexual person is. If you're a homosexual who looks masculine, who's white, who comes from a bourgeois background, they accept you. But there's a lot of diversity in minorities, and as long as they don't accept gay migrants, gay people who look like me or who are more feminine, then to me it's just relative acceptation, and we don't want that because it's being hypocrite. They're looking for a reassuring profile of homosexuals that fit their profile.
Je crois que ce sera la dernière. Ça dépend.
I think that's the last question.
Moi, j'avais une question. Est-ce
Alors,
que
je te-
I have a question. I can't see you. Hey. Do you have any action in your country of origin, Tunisia? Tunisia is very dear to my heart. I lost my father when I was young. He's buried there. It's the country of my 2 parents. I even wore the national jersey of my country, Tunisia. So I always have a lot of energy for that country. But unfortunately, my book is not allowed to be sold in Tunisia. And I always make a distinction between the government and the population. Right now, the Tunisian president is not the most open-minded person. And that applies to many topics. He makes decisions that I consider quite racist and homophobic. I led some actions in Tunisia with the French embassy. I met organizations, I met people, but unfortunately, organizing an event like this one would be complicated. But it's such a shame because I get a lot of messages from young people from Tunisia who congratulate me for the message I'm sending. And that's also a message I'd like to send to you. We should come out of this supposed binary system where the West is very open-minded and then Africa is homophobic. That's not true. That's not what I'm seeing in the field. I'll give you an example. When my book was released, I had a few cousins on my Instagram account, and I got rid of them because I thought I need to take care of friends, and then we'll see. But when you do interviews like Brut, Combini, or Quotidien, within 24 hours, everybody knew. And I remember my cousin sent me an audio, and I was scared to listen to it. I did, and he was telling me, "Congrats for what you did. You're like my brother. You still are my brother." He lived his entire life in Tunisia, and people would think that nothing is preparing him to be so open-minded. And I got my first death threat from a guy who lives in Lyon, who's French. And if I'm saying this, I got also messages of hatred from the Muslim world, but I like to say that it's not black or white. There's a lot of nuance in life. It depends on your experience, your background, who you meet, what you read that make you open-minded or not on different topics.
Merci. Comme on arrive tout doucement.
And since we are near the end, I think Apolline, you had a final question for you. We are together as part of the Forum Normandy for Peace, and especially the Freedom Prize, which you know, and it's a way for young people to question what freedom is and to push them to be committed. And Apolline can ask you a final question, so it will be your conclusion. What does it mean for you to be committed to freedom? And to conclude, would you like to say a word for the young people in the audience today?
Moi,
If I were to send one message to you today, it's that I think the time where you could be a young person on Earth without being committed is over. We're not going to talk about the geopolitical news, but the world is not so happy these days, and you're part of the world. And as Bertrand said, you are part of the world now. And when I was your age, I would tend to admire adults, like presidents, leaders, etc. But when you see what's going on at national or international level, honestly, I don't think there's anything to admire. And when you're a young person, you just want to enjoy life and not think about grown-up problems. But in front of me, you don't look that young either. And it's up to you to decide not the world you want to create, but the world you want to have starting today. And when it comes to fighting for freedom, I said it earlier, it applies to all of us. Could be due to your social background, the color of your skin, your religion, your professional preferences. If you want to live in a nice vision of the world that I have for you, it cannot be done without you. And I can tell you, we are entering the presidential elections, etc., but never forget that those who have a lot of hate in their heart will stand up and will go to vote. They will take the time to wait in line for an hour or two to put their ballot full of anger in order to express their anger and their bitterness. And we also need the people who are happy, who have a positive vision of life, to find this in them. And we need to stop saying, oh, there's no point in voting, etc., because when you're so fatalist, we would still be in the Stone Age. Women couldn't vote, there will still be slavery, and I wouldn't even be on stage in front of you, so wake up.
Merci beaucoup Ouissem
Thank you very much, Ouissem, for this moment. And thank you for daring to ask questions. You were perfect. And final conclusion, Bertrand is going to come to give you something or tell you something. I'm going to take 30 seconds to ask you to give a round of applause for Sarah and Apolline, who were facilitating this afternoon session. Give a round of applause to the departments of the Normandy region who are working hard to organize these events. And I'd like to tell them once again that I'm happy to be working with them every day. And I think you can stand up for Ouissem. And giving a standing ovation. You said it. He chaired the jury of the Freedom Prize 25. Gisèle Pellicot was the winner. And at the end of the debates of the jury, I symbolically gave you the Stade Malherbe jersey signed by the members of the jury. The cheapest and fastest transfer in history of football. It was a symbol and you wore it immediately. And as you said, when you wear something, you accept the values. And that's one of the flagship teams in Normandy. And Normandy is a land of tolerance, a welcoming land. And today I'm going to give you another gift, a symbol, to show you that since you signed it, you're somehow from Normandy now and you'll always be welcome here.
C'est incroyable. C'est incroyable. Il y a autre chose en dessous? Ah oui.
Attends, on va montrer.
Ah mais il se monte.
On va vous montrer.
Ça se monte? C'est quoi? C'est un truc qui a été fait par un lycée professionnel. Ça se met ou c'est... On peut pas faire d'ampleur. Ah waouh.
Bon, vous avez compris que Ouissem, il était très spécial.
As you saw, Ouissem is a special person for us. And this is now the end of this session on the struggle for freedom. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your questions. And support the prize and present it to everybody. Congratulations.